Chapter 7. The Invasion. The next morning, the city awoke under an unnatural silence. The hum of cars was muffled, and pedestrians moved aimlessly, as if pulled by some invisible force. Luke and Sarah hurried to the observatory, a lingering unease from the previous night pressing on them. "Something's changed," whispered Sarah as she opened the door. "The city, it's not like yesterday." Luke approached the monitors and immediately noticed anomalies. Electrical grids, Wi-Fi signals, radio waves, all responding to a strange, pulsing signal. Human actions became chaotic. Some people disappeared from sight, while others moved as if following invisible commands. "This is no longer just local contact," Luke said, a chill running down his spine. "The signal has spread. It has invaded the city." Sarah felt panic rising, but restrained it. She knew Luke needed a clear mind to find a solution. "We have to try to localize the signal's source," she said. "If we find its core, we can cut off its influence." They connected additional sensors throughout the city, but the signal reacted to every move they made. Electronics flickered, forming spirals and pulses across the screens. Luke felt the signal attempting to penetrate his mind through the protective helmets, which were only partially effective. "I see anomalies in 3 districts," Sarah reported. "That's where the concentration is highest." Luke leaned over the map. He knew that if they didn't act fast, the signal would seize more minds and the catastrophe would spiral out of control. "We need to operate on 3 fronts simultaneously," he said, feeling the urgency. "I'll go to the observatory center, you connect sensors in the northern sector, and we'll deploy drones to the south." Sarah nodded, letting fear turn into determination. They split up and began their work. Luke climbed to the observatory roof, sensing a strange hum in the air. The signal felt warm and cold at the same time, as if alive. In the city center, people moved chaotically. Some tried to speak to each other, but words seemed to vanish, as if sound itself were being muted. Luke connected to the camera network to monitor the situation and saw the first signs of forced control. People began performing movements that were not their own. "Sarah, it's starting to control consciousness," he shouted over the radio. "We need to act fast." Sarah connected sensors to a drone and launched it over the northern sector. Spirals of signal appeared on the screens, infecting every electronic device. The drone sent anti-pulses, attempting to disrupt the signal's structure. "It's working," she murmured, seeing the pulses partially break the signal's hold. But only partially. Feeling pressure and sharp impulses in his head from the signal, Luke made a bold decision: to connect the antenna to the city's high-power repeaters to create a counterwave and isolate the signal's source. "It's risky," Sarah warned. "We could harm people if we make a mistake." "I know," Luke replied, "but there's no other way." He raised the antenna, connected it to the system, and launched the counterwave. For a moment, the city fell into an even deeper silence. People froze, eyes wide, electronics flickered. "We stopped it," Sarah exclaimed, relief flooding her. "But only for a moment." The signal reacted instantly, trying to adapt, but Luke's pulse created a solid blockade. On the screens, the spirals of the signal began to break apart, and people gradually returned to normal. Luke and Sarah knew this was only the first phase of their counteraction. The signal had not vanished, and its influence could return stronger. They needed a deeper understanding of its nature. "We survived today," Sarah said, watching the city slowly come back to life. "But tomorrow it will strike again." Luke nodded, feeling fatigue, but also determination. "Next time, we'll be ready. We'll find the source and put an end to this game." The city slept, but the waves of the signal still rippled through the air, a warning. The fight had only begun, and how they prepared would determine the fate of thousands. Chapter 8. The First Victim. The next day,
The city awoke under a tension that was barely perceptible, yet impossible to ignore. Luke and Sarah decided to patrol the districts with the highest signal concentration, carefully observing both people and devices. "Luke, look," Sarah whispered, pointing at the surveillance screens. "There, the signal is affecting someone." On the monitor appeared the face of a middle-aged man standing on the sidewalk near a shop. His gaze was empty, his movements erratic. At first, he tried to speak to passers-by, but words failed to form. "This is the first victim," Luke said, clenching his fists. "The signal is starting to control consciousness selectively." Sarah connected sensors, attempting to determine whether it was possible to isolate the man from the signal's influence. But every attempt at deactivation only intensified the effect. The man suddenly lunged forward, stumbling and falling. "Luke!" Sarah screamed as he ran to help. "He's in danger!" Luke pulled out a portable pulse device, attempting to stabilize the man's mind. For a brief moment, the man's gaze cleared, but the signal regained control, compelling him to stand and head toward the railway station. "He's heading straight for the tracks!" Luke shouted. "We have to stop him!" Luke and Sarah ran after him, trying to convince him to stop, but his mind was entirely under the signal's control. Thinking quickly, Luke sent a pulse through nearby antennas, creating a narrow blockade to limit the signal's reach. "Now!" he yelled, rushing to grab the man and restrain him. But it was too late. The man stumbled, and the metallic screech of the train tracks echoed like a silent scream. The first victim of the signal had died before Luke and Sarah's eyes. Luke's chest tightened with grief, while Sarah barely held back tears. We couldn't save him," she whispered, staring at the empty tracks. Luke felt despair, but he knew retreat was not an option. "This is a warning, Sarah. The signal is growing stronger. We have to act faster and more precisely." They returned to the observatory to analyze the data. On the monitors, new signal spirals flickered, rapidly spreading through buildings and streets. Luke and Sarah realized that the signal was no longer just controlling people. It was selecting those most susceptible to its influence, shaping their behavior to serve its own purpose. "Luke," Sarah said, her voice trembling, "we have to prepare the city. The first victims are only the beginning." "I know, and we'll find a way to stop it, even if this is our last chance." Meanwhile, in the city's darker corners, where the signal had not yet spread, groups of people noticed the strange behavior of the first victims. They discussed what they had seen and began organizing themselves for protection. "It's the signal. It's controlling them," one man whispered. "We have to stay together, or we won't survive." Luke and Sarah felt time slipping away. Every minute without action increased the number of people under the signal's control. They knew that to save the city, they would have to take extreme measures. "We have to find the source of the signal, otherwise the number of victims will keep rising." Sarah nodded, realizing that their path led straight into the heart of danger, where any mistake could be fatal. The first victim of the signal was a stark reminder. The battle for human consciousness had only begun, and now they had to act swiftly and decisively if they hoped to stop the catastrophe.
Chapter 9. Invasion of the Mind. The next morning, the city awoke with a strange sense of tension. The air felt heavier, and sounds carried echoes of foreign thoughts. Luke and Sarah were once again in the observatory, eyes glued to the screens. The data showed that the signal was spreading faster than they could predict, and it was now affecting not only people's physical actions, but their thoughts. "Luke, look!" Sarah exclaimed, pointing at the monitor, where the face of a middle-aged woman sitting in a cafe appeared. She's talking to herself, but her words don't match reality." Luke leaned closer, his heart pounding. The woman waved her hands as if trying to stop someone, but her eyes were empty. It wasn't aggression. It was a complete escape of consciousness. "The signal is intruding into people's minds," Luke whispered. "It's beginning to rewrite reality in their perception." They decided to investigate the zone with the strongest signal. Sarah put on a portable scanner, while Luke held the pulse blocker. Together, they walked the streets, searching for the first signs of mental intrusion. "Luke, look," Sarah said, as a teenager appeared on the screen, standing in front of a store, repeating meaningless phrases. "His mind seems trapped in the signal's stream." "We have to isolate him," Luke replied. "Otherwise, the signal will continue spreading." They ran to the teenager, but he didn't respond to any attempts at communication. Only when Luke activated the pulse blocker did the electromagnetic wave momentarily stabilize his mind. The boy looked around, confused, as if waking from a delirium. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, offering her her hand. He nodded, but his eyes remained empty. They realized this effect was only temporary. The signal would return unless they found its source. Back at the observatory, Luke and Sarah combined data from cameras, sensors, and consciousness readings of the first victims. The city map resembled a web. The signal spread in waves, affecting everything in its reach. "It's choosing targets strategically," Sarah said. "People most susceptible become carriers, and the signal spreads through social contacts." "We need to act fast," Luke replied. "If we don't stop it now, the city will become a stage for mass mind control." Their next goal was to determine whether the signal affected only individuals or could influence large groups simultaneously. They decided to test it at an abandoned warehouse where groups of young people gathered for training. "This is risky," Sarah said, "but we have no other choice." They set up sensors and blockers, and as the signal penetrated the warehouse, Luke and Sarah observed immediate changes in the teenagers' behavior. They began mimicking each other, movements perfectly synchronized, eyes hollow. "This isn't just control," Luke said. "It's a direct invasion of consciousness. It's creating a collective mind under its influence." Sarah recorded every frame, looking for patterns in the signal's effect. They noticed, the larger the group, the stronger the effect. The signal was using human contact to amplify its reach. "We need a strategy," Sarah said. "The signal's influence grows linearly with the number of people. If we can break the chain, we might reduce its power." Luke nodded. "Then our next target is to limit the zones of influence. We have to isolate groups of people and cut off the signal's path." They devised a plan. Mobile blockers and sensors would create safe zones where the signal could not penetrate. Yet even this plan offered no guarantees. "I'm scared," Sarah said, staring at the city map. "The more time we lose, the more people come under control." "Then we can't hesitate," Luke replied. "Every minute counts for their lives." That evening, the signal activated in densely populated areas. The first carriers began recruiting others, and Luke and Sarah were forced to operate in two places at once. They split up, one focused on isolating people, the other on localizing the signal's source. "I see its coordinates," Luke shouted over the radio. "It's emitting waves from the South District." "Good," Sarah replied. "I've got the blockers. Hold on, this will be dangerous." At that moment, the signal actively manipulated people's minds in the streets. Chaos erupted. People ran frantically, shouted, and tried to harm others. But the mobile blockers created corridors of safety where the affected could escape its influence. "It's working," Sarah exclaimed, as one blocker held back the crowd. "We can contain it." But Luke knew it was only temporary. The signal was adapting, learning their actions and altering its strategy. To stop it,
They would need to locate its source and destroy it directly. "We're getting close to the end," Luke said, eyes glued to the screen. "The next stage is the most dangerous, and if we fail, the entire city will fall under the signal's control." Sarah nodded, understanding the scale of the threat. They had one chance: to penetrate the signal's source and interrupt its spread while the city could still be saved. The first victim of the signal was a warning. Now, every step was a matter of life and death.
Chapter 10. Direct Contact. Night had draped the city in a thick, dark veil, but Luke and Sarah had no time for sleep. They stood on a roof of an abandoned building, staring at the southern district where the signal's coordinates were at their most powerful. Anxiety grew with every second. Each minute of delay could cost hundreds of lives. "We have to go in there right now," Luke whispered, looking at the map. "Otherwise, a signal will take over the entire city." Sarah nodded, checking portable blockers and sensors. "We can't fall behind. If the signal senses us first, it could attack our minds." They descended narrow streets, hiding in shadows, avoiding the first carriers of the signal, who were already acting as coordinated agents of its influence. People around them ran chaotically, as if swept up by an invisible wave. "It's like thousands of voices in my head," Sarah whispered, covering her ears. "They're not just controlling bodies, they're controlling thoughts." Luke didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the coordinates pointing to an old observatory on the outskirts, a former scientific branch abandoned after a space research program closure. That was where they hoped to find the signal's source. "All right, we split up," Luke ordered. "I'll take the upper level, you control the blockers. If anyone approaches, the signal must not reach us." Sarah nodded. She activated mobile sensors and set up the first barriers to slow the signal's spread. Luke began climbing the old service stairs, holding the pulse blocker in his hands. Every step echoed through the empty corridors unnaturally loudly. When he reached the top floor, Luke saw a room emitting a faint blue wave of light. It pulsed like breathing, filling the space with a sense of foreign consciousness. "This is it," he whispered into the radio. "The source of the signal is right here." Sarah watched the sensors from below. The wave of light had already started spreading to nearby streets. Luke took careful steps, trying not to advance too quickly. "Luke, you can see this isn't just equipment. It's like a living brain. It reacts to movement, to electromagnetic signals." Luke raised his hand to the sensor control and activated the blocker. The light responded, its wave diminishing for a few seconds, but it wasn't enough. "It's adapting," Luke thought. "Every action changes its behavior." Suddenly, the signal emitted a powerful surge, reflected on Sarah's scanners. People around, even those trying to flee, froze like puppets. The consciousness of everyone in the wave's range began syncing with the source. "Sarah, hold on!" Luke shouted, activating the pulse blocker at full power. The wave rebounded off the blocker, but its force was so strong that Luke felt pressure in his chest and thoughts began merging with foreign voices. He saw faces of people, their fears, anger, doubts, and despair, and for a moment feared losing control of his own mind. Sarah sensed the wave shifting on her sensor and immediately activated a second blocker, amplifying the effect. Luke managed to stabilize, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. "I have to go inside," he said without looking back. "To the generator. That's the only chance to stop it." Sarah nodded, supporting him with her words. "Luke, be careful. We don't know how deeply it can invade consciousness." Luke opened the door and stepped into the central room. Before him stood an old antenna complex connected to a series of computers and sensors. The blue wave radiated from the very core, and the air thrummed with the energy of a foreign will. "This is it," Luke said, approaching. "And if I don't stop this now?" The complex activated a new wave. Luke's mind momentarily drowned in millions of voices. Fear, anger, doubt, and despair merged inside him. But he focused on the blocker. Feeling its power stabilized his thoughts. He connected the blocker directly to the core, and the blue wave began to oscillate, gradually weakening its influence. Luke felt the consciousness of people around slowly returning to normal. "Sarah," he shouted, "the influence is decreasing." Sarah replied through the radio, "You did it! Luke, we can stop it!" Gradually, the blue light faded and the city began to return to reality. People emerged from chaotic states, looking around, unaware of what just happened. Luke breathed heavily, standing before the antenna complex. He knew the signal was defeated, but the consequences for those who had succumbed would linger. "It's over. At least for now," he whispered. Sarah approached and took his hand. "Now we need to rebuild the city and help the people, and maybe figure out who sent this signal in the first place." Luke nodded. Together they stood in the darkness, watching as the first rays of dawn illuminated the city. The battle was over, but the mysteries remained, and they would have to discover what lay behind the signal and who had sent it.
Chapter 11. Aftermath. Morning revealed the city in a misty light. The streets were shrouded in haze, but the traces of the previous night's chaos were already visible. Abandoned cars, broken streetlights, scattered personal belongings. Luke and Sarah stood on the roof of a building, watching as residents slowly returned to life. "That was terrifying," Sarah whispered, leaning against the parapet. "People don't even realize how close they came to disaster." Luke remained silent, his thoughts occupied with the possibility that the signal was only part of a much larger plan. Who sent it, and why? And why had they ended up at the center of it all? "We need to check who survived and who needs help," he finally said, "and track if there are any remnants of the signal left." Sarah nodded, pulling out her tablet. Sensor data showed that the signal had affected people's brains in varying degrees. Some were barely harmed, others remained in a semi-consciousness state. "Look," she said, zooming in on the map. "There are still several districts that require immediate attention. If we don't intervene now, the consequences could be catastrophic." Luke and Sarah descended into the city center, where they noticed a group of people wandering chaotically. They approached carefully, using portable blockers to gradually stabilize their consciousness. People looked at them in confusion. Some cried, others shouted. "Everything will be okay," Sarah reassured them. "We're here to help." Meanwhile, Luke noticed one of the blockers begin to signal unexpectedly. He quickly checked the readings. A small portion of the signal remained active, and its source was relatively close. "This can't be," Luke whispered. "Someone left a backup generator, or someone recently reconnected to the signal." Sarah leaned over his tablet, studying the graphs. "This looks like new code. It seems the signal can be remotely restarted." Their anxiety grew. They realized that even after successfully neutralizing the signal, the city remained vulnerable. Anyone with the right knowledge could launch it again. "We have to find out who did this," Luke said firmly. "Otherwise, we'll never be at peace." Sarah nodded. "Then we'll have to start an investigation. But first, stabilize the people." They continued moving through the streets, restoring control over people's consciousness, connecting portable blockers, and helping those still under the wave's influence. Each rescued person felt like a small victory, but Luke couldn't shake the thought of those
who might have remained outside their reach. "There's another problem," Sarah said after checking the latest readings. "Some people who were under the signal's influence for a long time have started showing personality changes. Their reactions are unpredictable. Some become aggressive, others apathetic." Luke felt a chill down his spine. "That means the consequences could be long-term. We need a plan to help these people." They returned to the temporary command center, where they set up equipment for stabilization and monitoring. Gradually, the city began to come alive. Residents returned to work. Children went to school. Shops reopened their doors. But a lingering sense of unease remained for Luke and Sarah. Too many mysteries were left unresolved. "Do you think this is the end?" Sarah asked, looking toward the horizon. "No," Luke replied. "This is only the beginning. We know the signal came from an external source, and we need to find out who is behind it and why." At that moment, new data appeared on the tablet. Code resembling the original signal, but slightly altered. "Sarah, look at this," Luke pointed to the screen. "Someone tried to restart the signal remotely." Sarah shook her head. "This isn't just an experiment. Someone knows what we're doing and is trying to get ahead of us." Luke and Sarah realized their mission was far from over. The city was saved for now, but the dark forces behind the signal remained active. They sat in the temporary command center, reviewing data and formulating a plan for the next steps. One thing was clear: to completely eliminate the threat, they would have to not only track the signal's source, but also uncover who was behind it. And each new wave, each new action, could change the city's life forever.
Chapter 12. Finale. Evening had fallen over the city when Luke and Sarah arrived at the old signal observation station they had uncovered during their investigation. The building stood at the city's edge, half ruined, with cracked walls and shattered windows. Here, as they suspected, hid the one who had created and spread the signal. "We've finally reached the source," Sarah whispered, checking her portable sensors. "I'll connect the detectors to pinpoint where the signal is currently active." Luke scanned the room. Among chaotic wires and old computers, he noticed a figure sitting at the main terminal. The shadow moved smoothly, the face hidden beneath a hood. "You've stayed here longer than necessary," a low voice sounded, "and you know what that means." Luke said nothing, but slowly stepped forward. Sarah stayed behind him, ready to intervene. They knew any mistake could cost them their lives. "I don't understand why you're doing this," Luke said. "Why the signal? People suffered." The figure lifted their head, revealing a face. It was Dr. Green, a former astrophysicist who had spent years studying anomalous cosmic signals. His eyes glowed with a strange light, as if he had long lost touch with reality. "Luke, Sarah, do you think you understand what I'm doing?" he asked calmly. "The signal is just a test of the human brain's ability to perceive new forms of consciousness. I am opening a new level of evolution." Sarah felt her heart race. "You caused harm. People suffered. Some even lost control of themselves." Dr. Green smiled. "They will survive, and if not, that is part of the experiment. Now I have the data to continue my work, and no one can stop me." Luke stepped forward, holding the portable blocker. "This is not an experiment. It's a threat to the city. We will not let you continue." A silence fell, broken only by the soft hum of the computers. Then Green abruptly pressed a button on the terminal. A chain of signals activated a backup system, and the room filled with flickering blue light. "We don't have time," Sarah shouted, distracting him. "If the signal fully activates, it will affect the people again." Luke lunged forward and aimed the blocker directly at the terminal. The device buzzed, the flashes of light dimmed, and the signal began to weaken. Green recoiled, shocked. "You—" he began, but Luke didn't let him finish. "Yes, we stopped this," Luke said. "Human life is more important than your theories." Green tried to flee, but Sarah activated the building's emergency locks. He was trapped inside the room with the equipment shut down. Luke and Sarah ran outside, feeling the city's air refresh after prolonged danger. The city, once filled with chaos, now seemed quiet, almost peaceful. "We did it," Sarah said, looking toward the horizon. "The signal is neutralized and the city is safe." Luke nodded, but his gaze remained tense. "Yes, but the consequences will linger. Some people were still affected. We need to monitor them and help them recover." They returned to the command center, where data on stabilized individuals awaited them. Each case confirmed that the city had survived and the signal no longer held power. "I never thought a simple cosmic signal could cause such danger," Sarah said. "It changes everything." "Yes," Luke agreed, "and now we know that even the smallest signals can have catastrophic consequences. It's our duty to ensure this never happens again." They sat side by side, watching the sun set behind the horizon. The city lived its usual life, but Luke and Sarah knew the fight against invisible threats never truly ends. Dr. Green remained locked in the room, but his actions could no longer alter reality. Humanity was saved, and the signal no longer held sway over people's minds. "We survived," Sarah whispered, "and this time we triumphed together." Luke smiled, feeling relief. "Yes, the city is safe, but we'll be ready if anything else tries to destroy it." The sky darkened, stars beginning to appear on the horizon. Luke and Sarah stood together, knowing that even after such danger, life goes on and people are free once again. The city, having endured the signal, had been given a second chance, and the heroes understood, no matter the threats, they would always be ready to protect those they loved and what mattered most.